This is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show devoted to the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Brian Searle and Kara Sismadia. You'll hear from special guests that focus on topics to help your business succeed, all backed by Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searle with Insider Perks, here as always with Kara Sismadia from the Canadian Camping and RV Council. We have everyone here today. I'm just going to take a deep breath before I introduce everybody because it's been a long time. I haven't had to do that. So Sandy Ellingson's here with us. Christine Taylor, Towne Law Firm. She's here to make sure I don't say anything silly. Mark Koep's here for all his knowledge and everything he does with virtual tours and marketing and everything else. Casey Cochran from Campspot. Really not sure what he does, but hopefully you'll tell us about Campspot at some point. Scott Foos is here from Horizon Outdoor Hospitality, and Mike Harrison from CRR Hospitality. I'm super excited to have the whole gang here together. Where do we want to start, guys? I feel like I've been coming up with all these topics that are relatively boring for people for a couple weeks now. So somebody throw something out there. What's on your desk? What's happening in hospitality? What's going on? What should we talk about?
How about it's spring and people are starting to go camping again?
Well, we've covered that actually. It's spring in Calgary, but not necessarily in Michigan or New York. Probably in Florida. It never really stops being spring there, right? So what about where you are, Mark? Is it spring? Or?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm up near the Black Hills of South Dakota and up in Wyoming. And the last 3 days, all of a sudden, there's just a flood of RVs out on the road. We're seeing them all over town, all over the place. And it's both rentals and private units out and about. So people are traveling already. Our data... first off, Campspot, I'm going to give Casey and specifically Michael a plug. They're now releasing some industry data from their database, which is showing this overall trend of our industry. Is if you look at the macro environment is kind of tough, but our industry, we're down a little bit, but people are still camping, and so it's good to see that many people out camping. On our end at Campground Views, our user traffic is way up, and there's other reasons for it, but just the general amount of people searching for campsites is there. So it's exciting to see that. And I think I'm like you, Brian and Kara, right here. It's been freezing cold. We've had a brutal winter here in Wyoming, just brutal, and it's 75 outside. So
we actually didn't sit here, did we, Kara? It really wasn't that cold. It didn't feel like this winter here.
Yeah, no, I mean, we had a couple of rough stretches there, but nothing out of the ordinary for us.
So maybe this is a good place to start with the data, right? Just talking about this KOA released their North American Camping Report. Before we get into the data, Mark, I have a question for you. I'm just curious because every time we ask you how things are going, you say there's RVs out on the road. I'm passing. Do you go out and hunt them?
I do actually. Yeah. It's like whenever you're looking for something, all of a sudden you see them everywhere. I'm looking for a new car that I've never seen this vehicle on the road before. Now that I'm actually looking at it, I see the darn thing everywhere. So yes, for 12 years of my life, it was all about RVs. So I see them, I spot them. I even know what type of tires they have on their units. That's how crazy I am about the RVs. At night when you go to sleep, do you count RVs instead of sheep? I do. I can see the interstate out my door here, so I count RVs.
All right. Let's talk about data. Who has digested and read the North American Camping Report besides me, who fed it into an AI and had questions that I just asked of it because I can't read it?
I have not had a chance to look at it lately. We've been busy with our advocacy stuff. We were in Ottawa all last week, so I'm excited to dive into it.
I took a high-level look at it, and the big thing is the number of campers that went camping both last year and are considering doing it this year. It shows that continuous trend that people are interested in the outdoors. It kind of ties into a conversation I was having with somebody who was international yesterday, and they were asking about our business. They provide marketing services and technology services, and it was a sales call. And he's like, "Well, what do you guys do?" And I said, "We're in the camping business." And his response to me was, "Oh yeah, you Americans are really into the outdoors, right?" So it's kind of just like an international perception. Yeah, you Americans are into the outdoors. Is what
so you're North American. You're North American. Canada's a North Americans, Canadian. So
right, but what country in the world? I'm very curious. Is just not into the outdoors as a general rule. Everybody has outdoors.
Antarctica.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I bet you there's a lot, like, mostly Antarctica is the scientific research people who intentionally go out and collect ice samples every day. So by definition, they would have to be, right?
Not big campers though.
That doesn't mean they're into the outdoors. That means they have to go outdoors.
Right.
But they choose to go, and I don't know. Anyway, that's another
Anyway, I think, yeah, Mark, I think that it really speaks both to the kind of longevity of the lifestyle, which we talk about often, right? Just the resiliency of the industry as a whole and all of that. But then also, I think, there's other factors kind of at play here too, where I think a lot of, at least in Canada here, a lot of our members were anticipating folks would return to traveling in kind of other formats and ways. And now with the economy kind of being a little bit volatile and people pinching pennies, they're kind of sticking to this affordable way to kind of still travel and, do all of those things. So really a positive for us, but I think those factors are resulting in longevity in terms of bookings and that sustaining that level of interest in camping for sure.
What I found interesting was some of the demographical information, the evolution of, Gen Z. They said Gen Z is now 1 out of every 4 campers, right? So, we've had a lot of discussions about our parks, and, we're very, very, very family friendly and, multi-generational and not, restrictive to just a particular age category. But I think, that's very interesting, and how do campgrounds and parks and resorts evolve to make sure that, it isn't just 55 plus anymore. And, what amenity sets do they have? What kind of activities do they have? What experiences do they have? Because that's where clearly the market is going. Baby boomers, retirees, snowbirds, those are all going to continue, but it's not the only demographic. And if you look at the last 5 years, that has shifted, as well. So that's what I drew out of it.
I mean, I can attest. I'll go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to ask Casey or Scott if you had read it, since everybody else seems to not have yet.
I scanned through it. I didn't. I scanned through it. We looked at some high level stuff, but we'll probably take a deep dive into it when time permits. But just to what Mike was saying too, in regards to the kind of aging, we brought a big group to his park of friends over spring break, and it was interesting. We had maybe a group of 40 people, and so imagine like that coming through with kids and everything to their park, and it was just everyone that was with us was truly blown away with that style of vacationing. It was everyone assumed they were going to stay in a hotel in Sedona, and that was going to be the experience. And I went out to Mike's park a few weeks prior and just had a great time, and ended up convincing everyone, saying, hey, if you want, we can switch gears and you can do some cabins and you can do some of these covered wagons just for a different experience. And everyone left there. I think everyone left with like 35 more people now saying the next time that we go on vacation, looking at other accommodations in addition to that. And I think what Mike's saying is extremely relevant, right? Like you're introducing to some extent a different age group to this experience. And it's not to say that they're never going to stay in a hotel again, but just adding that element of another option is becoming more and more relevant. And so the more parks I think that want to accept that, right? Because I remember saying too, in the same regards, we were there and you have some kids buzzing around and things of that sort. And for someone that's retired and that they don't want someone buzzing around them, they want to be walking and they don't want to get passed by a bike, right? Or something along those lines at any type of speed. So again, there's those different dynamics, but it is interesting seeing how many people in that 55 below category. And I think there's still a massive opportunity for that many more people to kind of get introduced to that. And again, not to replace hotels, but to add that as an option. I think it's going to become very, very relevant and very, very interesting to watch the data on that.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that I thought it was interesting that this is the first time they've actually taken data from like just the general travel industry, people who are staying in hotels and things like that. And I don't remember the exact number, but I do remember it was significant. It was very, very high, that of the people that traveled for business and pleasure who had never stayed in a campground, I want to say it was something like 73% of them said they had stayed at some type of a accommodation at an RV park in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty significant because these people they've been our demographics to some extent, but they didn't own campers. And we've really not gone after the people that don't really own campers really hard yet, I don't think.
That was in yesterday's report, Sandy?
That was in the report from
KOA.
From the KOA report.
Can we try to find it? I have it pulled up here.
Yeah.
But
And
anyway,
I think that Scott Bayer, who helped to write that report or who's responsible for it, is actually going to be at the Florida conference. He's going to be expanding on that quite a bit. So it's going to be a lot of fun to listen to him and his thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Hotel guests, you said? Or what was it talking about?
I'm trying to remember the term they called. There was a specific term they called them, but they were talking about people who've only traveled for business or pleasure and stayed in hotels. They have a term for it, and I don't remember what that is. I apologize.
It's interesting.
Oops, sorry.
Go ahead, Kara.
No,
well, I was going to say, kind of following up on what you were saying about affordability. You know, Casey mentioned Sedona. Sedona's $479, $529, $439 a night. You know, and our glamping options are considerably cheaper than that. But there's crossover. You know, in May or June, they have the annual, Arizona Hotel Lodging Conference, and the president of the National Association is speaking, and I'm attending that, right? So I think there is blending of some of this, hospitality guests, traditional hotel guests, that if we ignore or don't understand that segment, I think we're leaving money on the table and potential customers, similar to Sandy's point and similar to what Casey said. There's just going to be continued more opportunities to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've seen that trend growing as well through the pandemic, right? I mean, when folks were scared or they didn't want to hop on planes and cruise ships weren't sailing, they turned to camping and outdoor hospitality, and we said a few times on the show, kind of during the thick of that really it's up to the operators to ensure that they're exceeding a guest experience expectation of what they think camping is. I think it's incredible that, Casey, you took such a large group, and Mike, I think it's awesome that your property hit it out of the park so that we continue to build that audience. I think one other point that I wanted to mention too is the emergence of Gen Zers continuing to become one of the fastest growing segment, and soon will be one of the largest segments in camping demographic. Really understanding what they want from a property, and not just from a physical amenity or on-site activity experience, but what hospitality looks like to them. I think that baby boomers, by and large, and not to stereotype all of them or generalize all of them, largely are used to a hospitality standard that is kind of this like ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Like it's this very high end. When they think about a true high end hospitality experience, they think more of a catering to your every need type of experience. And I think the demographics are changing, and with that, having the ability to connect with people on a more emotional level. And I think Horizon's kind of pivoting to first hiring people that have the capability of having emotional intelligence and being able to connect with people authentically, knowing that each individual guest's experience on site will be unique to themselves, and not having it be so cookie cutter in the delivery of the actual experience outside of the physical amenities on site as well that you guys have discussed.
Christine, you've been quiet. Any thoughts from a legal perspective on, or I don't know, or whatever you want to do? Obviously, you have a lot of knowledge besides that. But
yeah, I have a couple of thoughts that kind of germinate in my head when I'm thinking about it. Talking about the changing demographic and how that is going to be a pool that we're going to stock, I would identify perhaps the issue that, how we advertise should be something that we're thinking about, because, some people have heard me say before, but even if we're advertising proactively for somebody, we have to be careful that our advertisements aren't discriminating against specific groups of other people. So, even though we might want to target a particular demographic or make sure that people know that we're open to a particular demographic, we have to be kind of careful in those advertisements. So, I would perhaps the biggest takeaway kind of from where we are in the legal realm to wrap up this piece of it is, although I'm encouraged and enthused by people wanting to have different demographics in their parks, I would just caution that you be very careful on how you advertise for them, because even positively trying to do something can kind of get you in legal trouble. So that would kind of be my piece there.
Well, I don't want to spend like a ton of time talking on that, but I feel like it's important, right? Is this obviously we want to be inclusive of age and sex and race and everything, right? But is that something you can actually get in legal trouble for an omission that was not intentional?
Yeah, so I mean, it is kind of specific. So, like, for example, I mean, I guess side piece, my family's gotten back into the camping industry again, and we now own a campground again. But as I was helping update all of our online stuff to reflect new ownership and stuff like that, for example, you know how Google Business has the ability to check that if you're open to everybody and you're inclusive and stuff like that. That's okay. You can say that you're open to everybody and you're inclusive and things like that. What's not okay, and the example I like to use that people are most familiar with, is like a bar having a ladies' night where ladies can enter for free, but men have to pay, because you're not allowed to treat groups of people disparately. So even though you think you're doing a positive thing, like, people in this group or who like this thing get a discount, but other people can't. If it's part of one of those federally protected classes, don't touch it. Don't even do a positive advertisement about it, because the people who are in the other part of that class could, in fact, I'm not sure that they would, but, we're now in a pretty litigious environment. They could, in fact, sue you for not treating them the same as that group that you were advertising.
That's really interesting to me. Has there ever been this big push or movement of people upset with the 55 plus community where like that could ever get somehow
right? Like I'm 54. What is wrong? Like, come on. I'm gonna be 55 next month. You want to let me in like that?
Oh, you want to know the best part? You can't discriminate against young people. So if it's only that they're young, you're fine. If they're 40 and over, you're in trouble, because, sorry guys, but the Older Workers Benefit Protection Act and all of that starts at age 40. That's
really?
a rude awakening for some people.
You can't complain and say because you were discriminated? That's very strange to me.
Yeah, no, you can't. Not
this
if
is
you
a
are,
landmine. I'm glad I don't.
If you are young, you can't discriminate unless you're part of some other class. So there are things regarding familial structure, whether you have kids or not, what religion, national origin, all of those things that you're part of. Those are things you can get in trouble for. But if you're just generally a young person, you can't say that you are discriminated against, which is why you can have all of those 55 and older establishments, because you cannot discriminate against young people.
It's just interesting because I feel like I try to be inclusive and cognizant, especially with marketing and advertising, right? But you read, I read a story the other day about a woman who started a bar that only shows female sports, which I think is a great thing because that's not out there enough, right? Sure. Maybe they don't get, but is that also, could that be reversed on her?
No, not unless she only allowed female patrons.
Okay. So, all right. Okay.
That's where the line is.
A relevant question to this conversation, Christine, I think in terms of, talking about how to set up our properties from an amenities and activities perspective to cater to all demographics. One growing trend, or it's been around for a long time, but something I continue to see is adult swim hours in the pool. Those properties that, have a mix of guests and some guests just want a couple of hours of no cannonballs. I mean, I'm right there. I'd love no cannonballs in the pool too, but I'm old and crotchety, but that's another story. How does that play out in this conversation as well, in terms of being able to allow those things where you're only allowing certain age groups into activities and amenities on site?
So if your cap is 18, let's say adults are 18 for you, you're likely fine. You're likely not going to run into any issues. If your cap is somewhere about delineating what a senior swim and stuff like that is, you might run into some issues. But most of the adult swims I know are basically kind of 18 and above. And as I said, the kids can't sue you for discrimination. So, that's not a problem. So I would say generally those are pretty cut and dry. It's the more specific you get, the more in trouble you get. The more broad you are, adults, kids, the easier time you have. I could see an issue. Gosh, if I'm thinking super negatively as the pessimistic grim reaper of the business world, where you were like, only single people who don't have children could swim, that would be more problematic. But if it was adults, you'd be okay.
But I feel like that's easy to see, right? Like that's an easy one to see, at least.
Sure, but you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, because the amount of phone calls we get about crazy things and what people are getting sued for, are all over the map. So,
No. And to your point, in our terms and conditions, our legal our lawyer advised we could not write specifically children must not be left unattended. It has to say 16 and under must be accompanied by an adult. It was just a slight dynamic change in the language. But somebody's got some really background noise. I don't know if it's wind or.
It's probably me. I'm out of my balcony. It's got a wind muff, but I'll try to mute when I'm not talking.
But I think that's an interesting dynamic that we have addressed and are quite careful with. Also in our neighborhood, our manufactured home community, we encounter the same types of discussions. And unfortunately, while we may think it's inane, it's part of the world that we live in today, and you just have to consider it as part of your operation.
Yeah, I mean, it's being clear. That's kind of a clearly defining a term thing, right? If you just say children, I don't know what children is. I mean, I am definitely way over 16, but I'm still my mother's child. So if I camp with my mother, am I her child in that thing, or am I?
I still act like a child. So
I do very oftenly. If I could wear costumes to work, it'd be excellent. But besides that piece, that's what it is. So I know people hate the prolific paperwork and the voluminous amounts of things and why attorneys define every word, but it's because of scenarios like that. Like, we're trying to be really clear about how those things are. So in that example, it's because children could be anything that you want to be more specific when you pick those specific rules out.
I mean, let me ask a controversial question here. Like, some of this is good, right? But does some of this go too far, where we're manipulating the legal system by just using a different word when we mean the same thing? Is it like, isn't there a line where it gets too much on a business owner?
Oh, I mean, that's a lot to unpack, I guess.
I know. And like, if you don't want to answer, that's fine. Like, it's
no, I mean, what I tell people
not you
all
necessarily,
the time,
but anybody.
No, I mean, what I tell people all the time, my husband says that I'm like one of those pull dolls and I have catchphrases, but one of my biggest catchphrases is the good, better, best model, right? So in the ideal world, in a bubble where it doesn't affect your business operations and you don't have anything else to consider, should you be very, frankly, anal about every word and very specific? Yes, absolutely. But I know that's unrealistic. And what I'm asking for people to do is just be better. So, if you set some rules and it said children, yes, I might advise you that you should define that and be more specific. But at least you had some rules. So you're already better than the campground who lets everyone run amok and then hopes and prays for the best outcome, right? So it's a gradient, right? If I could act in isolation, then yeah, but I know that I'm just one of many considerations. And I tell my clients a lot that some things are legal and some things are PR, right? So I can advise you what's the safest for you legally. Like, I had a client where we were talking about whether or not she bans people drinking before or if they're renting a river tube for them. Okay, this seems pretty obvious. Legally, I'd be like, I want everyone to be completely sober before they get on a tube and go on a body of water. That seems best for my liability. But the pushback PR-wise is like, So we had to try to figure out where a careful balance was. Like, we won't rent to anybody who's very obviously drunk. You're using alcohol at your own risk, and we advise against it. So that way they could still, like, from the PR perspective, have the experience their guests were looking for, but do as much as we could to a point to try to protect them without kind of pissing everybody else off.
And I know I said I didn't want to talk about this too much, but the last question for me about it is obviously anybody else can ask the question, but is it better to keep some of this stuff out of your terms and conditions and just kind of
Literally never.
Words
like the
matter.
specifically drunk people, right? Like, is that something you give staff discretion to instead of spelling it out? That's what I'm asking.
Well, oh gosh, that's a lot of stuff. So the streamlined version, it's about paperwork, procedures, and people, right? So you have a piece of paper and that outlines what the things are. You have procedures about how you enforce that, and you have the right people in place doing that. Because if you don't meet all those kind of requirements together, then it's going to be a mess. Like, I could put something on a piece of paper, but if I never enforce it and the employee I put in place to do so never does it, then that paper really isn't worth anything, because I'm showing that that's not the actual rule. So, you should write it down. I think it makes it clear for both your guests and frankly your staff what your expectation is. And if you're in, if it's a long-term or whatever, and this is a reason you want to remove people because it broke the rules, it's a nice thing to point to. Like, this is why you have to leave. You agreed to this and now you have to leave. But you got to have all those pieces together for them to work appropriately.
Okay,
Yeah,
I lied.
the perfect.
I lied. So my question is if I'm over 40 in a protected class and I'm going to Adult Swim, and the only way I feel comfortable getting in the pool is with a cannonball, and Scott's in the pool, can I be sued? Or do I have
What
to
would
be?
you be sued for? I guess if the rule was no cannonballs, okay, and then you did it, and it's Scott's campground, and his employee didn't enforce it, and
Well, no, Scott's just in the pool. Scott's the one who wants to sue them.
It's Mark's
Yeah.
campground then.
Because
It's Mark's
he doesn't like the
campground, and you hurt Scott because Mark didn't enforce his no cannonball rule, then yeah, Mark could get sued, but the rest of that are red herrings.
I have no control over what Brian does, though.
That's fair, but maybe we should have done a background check on him before we allowed him in.
I'm more realistic towards the campgrounds, and I just had this happen this week, so it's top of mind, is that, a lot of campgrounds have an age rule for the rigs. And so they'll say, if your rig is more than 10 years old, it has to be approved before we allow it in there. Well, it didn't used to be we had to have those. And then all of a sudden, we were trying to follow a brand. And so people made these rules to keep certain people out, both for PR and for safety reasons, whatever. So we put the rules in. And now it's almost going the opposite direction, because if you have the rule, but then you let one camper in because they spent $200,000 redoing their 1960 bus, but you didn't let the guy that had, the one that was just 1 year older come in. And then they say discrimination. And so, like, do you have no rule? Do you have the rule? Do you enforce the rule implicitly regardless? I think it's a really interesting scenario of where we've gotten to, because like you said earlier, if you've got the rule, you've got to enforce it. There's no more common sense anymore.
Well, I mean, that is kind of, so the line there, and I guess, sorry to dominate on this lovely topic, but the line there would be that you have to treat all people the same. So for example, if I brought in my RV that was 1 year old and it looked exactly 1 year older than the threshold, say it's 11 years old, and Brian brought in his RV, they're comparable in quality, but I let in the females because I just want a park full of females but not males, that would be disparate treatment. But the scenario you provided, I could kick that in 3 seconds, because I'd be like, they're not the same. So I could treat them disparately because this person's camper was not exactly the same. Now, the best, good, better, best mode is blanket nothing older than 10 years, so I don't have to go into these thought exercises or worry about it. But as long as I could prove that there was a reason they were treated disparately, that wasn't one of those protected classes, that I don't want males there, or I don't want people from Canada there, or whatever it is, then you'd be okay. We might want to scrub that Canada comment only because my in-laws are Canadian, so I definitely am welcoming all Canadians. But just saying, that's the difference. Is if there isn't a reason for the disparate treatment that isn't discriminatory, then you have an issue. But if there is a reason, like one's really nice and really safe and the other one isn't, then you are allowed to treat them differently.
Gotcha.
All right, that all makes sense. We should probably switch topics now, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsor of today's show. If I can find the graphic here, Fireside Accounting, because we're about halfway through. It's time to do that, and they don't discriminate against numbers, from what I hear. Lindsay and her team will handle all the things that you need to do and not just pick out ones that benefit you more than the others. So if you are looking for an accounting team for outdoor hospitality, experts in that industry, definitely reach out to Lindsay and her team. It's just past tax time, but it's never too early to get started for next year. So really appreciate them being a sponsor of this show. So what else do we got, guys? Let's talk about something happy. Somebody had to come across something that was interesting here. You guys talk to too many people every week.
I would say we're not in the happy spot. We're in the storm within the storm, because right now you have every park that's Florida that's coming out of their crazy season, getting everything ready for kind of the next year and rates and adjustments there, and then you have everyone coming into their busy season right now with new employees and training and setups and changes in pricing, and then you have, I don't know, we got 230 or 240 parks that are still onboarding, hoping to still go live here in the next like 30 days to take advantage of the entire season. So on our end, I wouldn't say happy, I would say busy, but it's definitely an interesting, this is like the month of all months right now is May for us. It's the perfect storm of all three client types all at once, which makes for some good times.
What are you guys seeing as far as booking lead times? So we're talking about and I think about this based on what Casey's saying with Campspot, right? With a changeover for some parks ending the season, some parks starting their season. But we've been talking to a lot of clients about this who are in the middle of that. Like in Florida, they're switching, types of season from transient or from seasonal to transient. Are you seeing that kind of shift either impact booking lead times temporarily? Are you seeing booking lead times change? Scott, you and I have had the conversation months ago on the show before about that and how you're seeing a little bit of it, but just does anybody have any clarity on that?
I mean, in general, I don't know if I have like a full diagnostic of the entire thing right off the bat, but that's something in our analytics tool that we put in front of every campground as best as we can, is that days that average booking window, and we put that front and center of one of the main things of the analytics dashboards that we're putting, because that is relevant, right? It is very relevant for parks to understand what does that window look like, so they can capitalize on advertising, they can capitalize on the other one that we just released that we're excited about is a heat map of where people are coming from. So where their reservations are actually coming from, putting in a digital map for them to be able to see, hey, this is where a vast majority of our current reservations are coming from. That, and also pairing that with how far in advance those people are booking, right? So again, data and knowledge is power, right? So pairing subtle things like that together to say, okay, this city that's 30 miles away on average is booking 15 or 20 days in advance, whereas this area that's still a very relevant spot for us to draw from maybe is booking further out in advance for whatever reason. So drawing some of those conclusions, again, to tailor towards your message, your marketing, your brand, and where and when to capitalize on those guests is very relevant. So that's something that we're hoping by putting that in front of parks and providing that kind of that analytic view of that will help them make some of those decisions easier, cleaner, faster, better, to be able to kind of pivot or to expand or change altogether, whatever the scenario is. But it's very relevant. So it's a great question. It's something every park should be looking at.
Yeah. And what I'm seeing.
Go ahead, Sandy. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say what I'm seeing with my campgrounds that are the more traditional campgrounds, their booking window is still much shorter. It's 45 to 30 days. But my campgrounds that are more of the destination campgrounds, places that have the water parks and all the extra things going on, their booking window is still much farther out, and people still have difficulty. And I think what's so funny is all this research that the KOA report has come out with basically supports that. But because we're talking about these Gen Zers who are looking for experiential camping. And so if our standard campgrounds don't understand how to market themselves for the experience, they're lagging behind versus the people that can market their big water parks or whatever the adventure is that they have going, which most of the destination parks do. So I thought that really aligned well with what I was seeing.
I don't know, honestly, if it's that cut and dry, though, right? And then, so what Casey's bringing, and I'm not saying you're wrong, Sandy. Like, obviously, it applies to the clients that you work for, and probably to a larger number of other people who are in a similar situation. But what Casey's saying is important too. is there anything we can draw from a pattern from, like, obviously we work with 400 some campgrounds. Scott works with, I don't know how many is it now, Scott, 67, something like that. Mark talks to people all the time. Is there any conclusions we can draw to help people who don't have that comparison table data, is what I'm asking.
Well, and I wasn't disagreeing with Casey. I was just adding another layer of what I was saying, because I thought what he said was great. Yeah.
I'm sorry if I came across that way. I didn't mean to imply that at all.
Hey, don't mess with me and Casey.
Well, that Campspot data that Michael shared shows the average booking days is 95 days. So across the entire Campspot spectrum, the average is 95 days. The biggest thing we're seeing this year, there's actually been a little bit of a shift. So if you look back last year, fuel prices had recently shot way up. So a lot of the long distance travel destinations had a significant impact. We had parks that were down 25% year over year last year because their average guest traveled 400 miles to get to them. So those travels dropped. This year, fuel prices are still elevated, but they're down. In fact, oil prices last week have dropped significantly. And we are seeing already people booking those Glacier National Park, those big long distance journeys this year a little bit more. I don't know what the end numbers are going to end up being, but we are seeing a slight uptick in those.
You think that's solely due to gas prices?
Yeah, solely due. Yeah, especially last year. Last year was the big one when
for sure.
prices.
Yeah, last year I get.
Yeah, so if you look at last year, the reason those trips got canceled was strictly fuel related. This year now, people have kind of normalized the higher fuel prices, and they're actually down, compared to last year by quite a bit in some regions. So you're seeing people start to plan those trips a little bit more. Plus, they've been used to the higher prices, so they budget accordingly for those new trips. The other thing that we're seeing is that a lot of this isn't a lot, but a lot of the popular Forest Service and national park areas, their campgrounds are closed. So you look at Rocky Mountain National Park, I believe it's now at least one, the big one, is closed for a remodel all year long. In Yosemite, there's two campgrounds that are shut down for remodeling. A lot of Forest Service campgrounds in California specifically, but in some of the other areas that received a lot of snow, they're already announcing that they're not going to open this season because they weren't able to open on time, and the camp hosts that they had scheduled to come in there had rerouted and gone somewhere else. So they don't even have somebody to work these campgrounds. So you're seeing some impacts on the public agency side for availability of campsites, and that's going to impact positively the private RV parks that are around those areas because people still want to go camping there. And they can't camp in the Forest Service, so they might go to that one. And that also then combines, there was just a data point, it was actually an action item released by the Escapees RV Club. The Bureau of Land Management is putting out public comments on some language that, depending upon how you interpret it, implies that they're going to start trying to limit access for boondocking lands out on BLM properties, which would definitely impact some of the Desert Southwest properties and so forth, where there's a lot of boondocking going on. That's people camping out in the middle of nowhere because of the availability of solar and whatnot. So you're seeing changes on the public side that's going to probably positively impact the private side. The cool thing about the private side is that we're pretty stable. You're open. You can come stay as long as we got a site, right? Versus the public agencies. How do you plan for that? You never know what's going to happen there.
I will agree with you. It's very interesting to me because I still think our economy is not headed to a good place, but it's not happening as fast as I thought it would. And so it's very interesting to me that that's what we're seeing across almost all of our clients is very much stability. Very much ADR is holding pretty steady. Very much bookings are, like, lead times are a little bit different, but bookings are pretty consistent. Nobody's really panicking. And if you're doing your marketing well, it feels like you're fine so far, and I think you'll continue to be. But it's just interesting to me how it is more stable than I thought it would be. I don't know if anybody else.
I think, and when I say this, it's a relative term, right? If we're comparing to last year and the year before, those are record years in the industry, right?
Right.
But if you look at some of the indicators, that isn't exactly the case, right? Campspot's reports show that May is softening, 3% down. The booking window has shortened, and ADR is down in the back half of the year, which means that, or indicates that a lot of campgrounds are opening discounts. I still believe, as many do, we haven't even come close yet to seeing what kind of recession is going to happen. And so I do believe there will be a little bit of a softening of the industry. While it is a more affordable industry than the hotel business for sure, it's impossible that it can't continue to reflect performance over record years, right? And Mark, well, I appreciate what you're saying about oil prices. It's obviously market specific. Arizona we have the highest gas prices in the country at $4.99 right now. So that they're up. So I think some of these indicators have to be continued to be monitored, because I don't think we're through our tough swimming yet. I do think there's going to be a bit of softening, both in ADR and some occupancy, and I think you're seeing that in glimmers as some of these, as I've read Michael's reports now for the last 3 or 4 months, the tone has changed. And Casey, I mean, you can confirm that, if I'm wrong, but it's a little bit more cautious, not negative, not pessimistic, but certainly cautious, just in terms of comparison of record years.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with you, Mike. And to your point, coming down from 21, especially, 22 was an interesting year, but we see there's another service that we follow that's tracks travel and analytics that's outside of the just camping specifically. And their April report shows that over the last 3 months, consumer sentimentism towards towards a recession occurring, or their belief in a recession occurring, was dissipating. Meaning, basically, they felt like there was more optimism in the economy over the last couple of months, but just in the last 30 days, that started to shift again. And I think what that tells us is that we're continuing to see a lot of volatility. I think that knowing that the folks are just waiting to book until they know a little bit more about what they're looking to do and what the economy is going to be doing. Even despite that uncertainty, 85%, according to this analytics service, 85% of American travelers are still booking trips, and they're planning 3.5 trips this year compared to 2.9 last year. I still don't know how you take a 0.9 of a trip or a 0.5 of a trip, but just drive halfway and come back. But
you run out of gas along the road. That's the way
exactly. But it's encouraging to know that we as a camping and traveling public are still very optimistic about hitting the road, but we are being much more cautious with our dollars. And I think Campspot's biggest booking week, is a good reflection of that. I mean, I think it blew your guys' expectations out of the water, right? I don't want to speak for you guys, but, and I think, there was, of course, a lot of marketing behind that, but it was also, promotion driven. And I think that people are still looking for value. And the good news is that camping is a great value. And to those folks that experienced camping through the pandemic that were traditionally hotel guests, hopefully some of those folks kind of return again as they see the price differences in the two offerings, and they still yet want to travel.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would definitely confirm that. I mean, absolutely, that's what we saw. I mean, the expectation for us, at least from our marketplace from kind of day one, was obviously always to kind of bridge that gap between someone that doesn't know where they want to go and bridge them up with someone that has availability, right? That's the logical part of it. But the other big piece of that, and I'm guessing this is a strategy for others, but not just saying Campspot, but it's to create more camper nights, right? I mean, a massive part of our marketing is creating additional camper nights, right? It's intriguing someone to say, I'm going to go again. I'm going to go for the first time. I'm going to book something in addition. I'm going to stay an extra. Like the goal with a lot of the marketing that we're doing now is that intriguing aspect to create more camper nights, right? Because we know that if, let's say, occupancy is maybe down in some capacity, where can you make it up? Well, you can make it up with getting more people to camp that maybe weren't considering camping before, getting someone to go an additional weekend or even additional day, going Thursday or staying until Monday or something along those lines, or it comes from other areas, right? You're going to say, well, I may sell less camper nights, but I'm going to get this much more add-ons. I'm going to sell this many more aspects of this at the park, events or whatever it is, like to drive additional revenue there. So, from the park standpoint, it's somewhat their responsibility to offer as many things that they can at the time of booking to drive that ticket number up. From our responsibility, at least from our marketing for our marketplace, is the goal is creating more camper nights, right? That at the end of the day, that's what we want. Now, selfishly, of course, we want to create more camper nights for parks that are using our software. But in theory, that's not always going to happen, right? I mean, we want to create more camper nights in general. But it's interesting because you can drive, to your point, Scott, you can drive action, right? You really can. Now it costs money, but you can drive people to consider either additional nights or alternative vacations or additional vacations by being in front of them, right? And then that's something that we're, of course, still trying to figure out. But that's a big thing, a component of our success is how many additional camping nights can we create for our campgrounds.
And I think looking at the further out booking periods, the August, September, October timeframe. I mean, I don't want to speak for our entire portfolio, but a number of our properties, as was evidenced in Campspot's reporting as well, are certainly weaker or down year over year in terms of booking velocity and pace for those time periods. And we're not like all that critically concerned yet, though, because we know that the booking windows have changed.
Right. That's
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. And we're ready though. We've got kind of our finger on the trigger to mobilize promotions and different marketing initiatives if we need to, but we're not there yet. We were concerned about May and June and the first half of July, but that's strengthened for the most part. So unfortunately, 2023 is just another roller coaster year for our industry. And I think, though, that continuing to be real and knowing that occupancy will be down, to Mike's point earlier, we will be down from record number of years. I mean, we will be back to those kind of pre-COVID periods. I think we'll be elevated as an industry overall. And the biggest takeaway is occupancy may return, but ADRs have moved. That's the name of the game for us. I mean, ADRs have moved significantly from where they were pre-pandemic. And I think if there was, one thing to be happy about returning to a pre-pandemic level is understanding your ADRs are up and then making your operations more efficient on the cost side so that you can still drive more NOI even with less people on site.
Yeah.
Are you very confident, though, that ADR will stay that way regardless of the economy?
I think, we had some fairly, I think, sober expectations on ADR going into 23, just, up 3%, maybe 5% in certain properties over where they were last year, but we were aggressive last year. If we don't hit that 3 to 5%, we're still very happy with where we were on ADRs last year. So I don't think that there's going to be a significant delta from the highest of highs in 21, 22 to where we are in 24, 25.
I was going to say, this is, related to what you're saying as far as operation efficiencies. I'll throw out another kudos to Mike and his team there, because when we stayed there, we got in late. So they had things waiting for us. But honestly, what I was blown away with, now granted, we checked in online and we did all that stuff, but I think I literally came across one employee, and they were amazing. The staff there was amazing, but for like a group of 40 people to staying there for 3 nights, I think we stayed there. In terms of like staff efficiency, it was incredible. Like it was almost, it's as clean as things were. And as the pool was warm, the hot tubs were good, they were clean, right? I think I talked with one staff member to rent a pickleball paddle. And like that was my experience like the entire time with staff there. Now, granted, they were great, they were nice. And it was just, we all talked about it. Like, this is like, we don't need anything. We don't need anybody. We're here, we're settled in, and everything is going. Now, obviously there's a lot more going on behind the scenes to make that all happen. But I just remember like being very, very impressed in terms of, again, the operational efficiency of that. Because you'd imagine, what do you guys have? There's 300 plus sites there, right? You have people staying full time, and you have a group of a crazy 40 people from Michigan coming in. And the fact that we didn't need to talk to anybody about anything for 3 days that to me is operational efficiency at its finest to some extent, because that we didn't need anything. We didn't need anybody.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback and the kudos. We have an amazing team there, and I think we apply a lot of the hospitality or lodging um, operational approach, I guess, to our resort business. We look at labor tools and labor management, and like you mentioned, how to be efficient, and but you're not taking away from the guests in the same way. So I think when we first started, it was a lot more, mom and pop traditional. There's not a lot of analytics, but I think, if you use good common sense, if you use, and I've heard Scott talk about, I've heard Kathleen Walsh talk about it. The smart operators are doing those things to make sure that you can be and we're doing that right now with Brian, working on Campy and how can we, be efficient and provide great customer service, without taking away the experience for the guest, and, through the AI chat, can we save time for our front desk and the reservationist, but the guest still gets a great experience? Absolutely we can. And there's so much focus on, to Scott's point, if you do soften, can you enhance your NOI, in the right way? We're always looking to, and I was looking at Casey as we were chatting, I was looking at our Campspot value report, just curious to see if we were up versus last year. I love the report that you guys put together with the site, site lock and the add-on and the optimization, dynamic pricing, and the marketplace. Those are the 5 areas that you can look at how you're enhancing your revenue, right? And so many of those are 100% flowable to the bottom line. I'm not sure if flowable is a real word, but it is now. And I think that's the name of the game is, how do you make these businesses more efficient while balancing the, customer experience? Randy also stayed with us, and, Scott, Randy, he provided me like 40 bullet points, but they were excellent, insights, right? To give you, some good operational improvements. So I appreciate that, Casey, and I think you're spot on, and I think all properties, should look at that same type of approach.
And I mean, I have a different perspective, but I do agree with the whole, like, I don't disagree with you, but I have a different perspective on the operational efficiencies of there. That's kind of a low-hanging fruit for at least a lot of the people that we work with. I mean, obviously, you guys have caught up your individual properties because that's what you do well. But for the individual independent properties and even some management companies, right, somewhere, operational efficiencies is a big thing. Like, we're going through it right now. Like, we're using a combination of obviously AI, but Zapier, and connecting our different tools that aren't AI together and saving dozens and dozens of hours for our employees that make us more operationally efficient. But we're also at the same time balancing that with our customer or our client experience to make sure that doesn't degrade. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here for tech to help too. And I mean, you mentioned Campy, but that's not, obviously that's one of hundreds of things probably. But
I think that is, I mean, just to play off of that for as people, going into their season, when we talk with owner operators or even like managers, like there is this sense of stress right now of staff and the amount of workload and, making sure they can get their employees ready to go and things are ready to rock. And it's like, I mean, anything an owner operator or manager can do to somewhat automate. It's amazing. Like, we always appreciate if parks actually look at some of the analytic tools that we create and hope that they're utilizing them. But it's incredible how many don't find time to do that, right? And we kind of constantly having to prod, say, hey, you should be looking at these things. This is very relevant. And so it's almost like anything you can do to streamline or automate, even if it just opens up that time to either breathe or even open up the time to dive into some of those nuances or some of those numbers or some of the analytics that can sometimes be very telling. Not all the time, but sometimes they can be very telling to help you either know where to put additional resources or less resources, or at least just to have fun spending time on where to put some marketing dollars or, where to put advertising. Like me, when I used to own the different businesses, like when I could work on the business instead of in the business, that was like the funnest thing you could do, right? Is getting yourself to the ability to think along those lines. But 98% of the time, that's not reality, right? But I would even challenge owners and even managers from that standpoint, because it's incredible how many managers actually truly run and own these parks. Like they really are doing everything to make these things work. But anything you can do to, justify that time to say, okay, well, we streamlined some of this, or we took this many more online reservations. That's an easy one, right? So we went from 50% to 62%. I'm going to justify this many hours a week to focus on this now, because otherwise you get sucked right back into other, day-to-day operational things. But whatever it is you enjoy or want to be able to work on, find some efficiencies, calculate them, and then focus on those areas that you want to, and it'll make a big difference, I think, on like enjoying some of the things you want to work on, but getting some good insights on your park and in your business.
I think the biggest challenge we see with that, right, is owners don't, not even owners, people don't know what it is possible to actually automate and continue to keep the customer experience at the same level, or the employee experience at the same level, right? And this is a challenge even for us with our employees who are in these tools every single day. I have them all creating lists of just tell me what you do that is repetitive or tedious, or you don't like. I don't care if you think it can be automated or not. Give me a list. I'll figure out how to automate 75% of it. You may not think it's possible. And then again, you can take that. And so their question and their concern is, right, and this is partly AI, but partly whatever, is, well, I'm a writer. What am I going to do then? Well, the answer is we're going to figure it out, because it's going to allow you to be creative and do something better and more enjoyable for you, just like a campground owner can then redirect their attention to do something that's more fun and more enjoyable for them versus the repetitive tasks that are the monotony of campground ownership. So I think it's all a good thing. You just have to, I think the biggest challenge is identifying what can and can't be.
I think it's amazing that it took 58 minutes for you to not mention AI. Like, I think that's incredible.
But that's so to be very clear, this is only like AI is this. Automation has this much to do with AI. It's a totally separate thing. It just it was the catalyst for us to start doing some of the stuff I had put off, like with Zapier, for 7 years.
Kara would have been so proud.
I'll jump in with what Brian said. Brian actually hit it on the head there, because people don't realize what they can do with automation. And I'm much like Brian in that I can figure out another way. And so one of the hardest things as an owner or manager is you don't really expect your employees or staff who aren't thinking at that level to even think about it. But you want to get the feedback from them on what their processes are and what they're doing, and then look at how you can potentially streamline that for them. And that's actually a key task for any operator, and it's a hard one. But if you do it, you can generate some significant ROI. Like on our end, operationally, we figured out how to reduce our production times by a multiple of 10, simply because I identified what was going on in it. We were able to cut off, 90% of the cost of producing those videos. And so as a result, then we're able to provide lower cost to the end client, create a better product and all that type of stuff. But that takes a different type of mindset. It actually takes a mindset of whatever we're doing now, let's throw it out the window and try to do it better. And that's, a constant improvement type of mindset. And it doesn't really exist in aggregate across your industry. The ones who are killing it, folks are on the show that are killing it. You're looking at that, but most of the industry is not. So that's always been kind of my goal, is to suggest ideas on ways to run your business. That's what Casey's doing. That's what Brian's doing. Here's better ways to run your business. And if parks in aggregate start doing that, it's going to improve the experience of campers overall.
Well said.
All right, guys, we have a minute and a half left. Any final parting thoughts?
Just buckle up. It's going to be another year. We're already in it, but another season.
Great. That's great. I love when it's interesting,
yeah.
Scott.
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think any of us are bored, though.
No, because it's interesting. If it wasn't interesting, we might be. So
that's right. Yeah,
I think for as much as I talk about the economy and things like that, I think we're all in a great place in this industry. I think if you're willing to be not even as crazy nuts as I am, but like 10% to the point where you are doing your marketing well, whoever you're working with, right? Whether you're working with a Scott and his team, or a Mike and his team, or a Casey with Campspot in the marketplace, or a me or a Mark or whatever. As long as you're willing to just do those kind of basic things that, let's be honest, 70% of other owners aren't, then I think you're going to be in a great position in 2023 and beyond. So, all right.
Cool.
Well, I'll spend the last 20 minutes thanking our sponsor, Fireside Accounting. Then, again, if you need, we talk about numbers and where things are headed and stuff like that. It's very important to keep track of this stuff so it doesn't catch up on you at the end of the year or the beginning of next year when you're trying to scramble and file those taxes and things like that. So just make sure that we need somebody who specializes in the outdoor hospitality industry, campgrounds, can identify discounts, things like that. Fireside Accounting is definitely the place that you should go, and we're grateful that they are a sponsor. So appreciate you guys all being here. Casey, Scott, Mark, Mike, Christine, Kara had to drop off, I guess, at some point. Hopefully she's got her internet back. And we really appreciate everybody being here. So we'll see you all next week.
Good to see you guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of MC Fireside Chats, hosted by Brian Searle and Kara Sismadia. Have a suggestion for a future show or want to see your campground or company as part of an episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Join us next week for another episode. And don't miss the latest outdoor hospitality news and commentary from around the world at moderncampground.com.